Yes.
Good evening, sir.
Sheshu,
Sir, good afternoon.
Yugandhar, good evening, good afternoon.
Good
Sir,
afternoon, sir.
Yes.
sir has joined, sir. Ajay Nitin sir is there.
Oh, Ajay joined. Great,
Hello,
Ajay.
sir. Yeah, hi, sir. How are you?
Very nice, Ajay. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Doing great. Very nice, Ajay. No change in you. Looking as if you are there at this institution. Very nice, Ajay. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Yes.
Yeah. So, Sheshu, shall I go ahead?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah, thank you, Sheshu. Thank you very much, my beloved uh, student. I proudly say, proud alumnus of this institute, Mr. Ajay Nitin. My colleagues, Sheshu, co-coordinators of this FDP, Mr. Sheshu and Mr. Yugandhar, respected HOD Madam, Professor Ramadevi, other colleagues of my department, and the colleagues of this faculty development program. Warm welcome to all of you. Warm welcome to all of you. Almost we are reaching end of this faculty development program. We are going to have valedictory tomorrow. And today is altogether a different and special day to all of us, and especially to me and Institute Kakatiya Institute of Technology and Science, Warangal. Because today the speaker is this proud alumnus of this institute. I take 1 minute of your precious time to introduce the guest speaker today. Mr. Ajay Nitin is product manager at Philips Healthcare, Bangalore. He's a proud alumnus of this institution. He graduated from this institute in electronics and instrumentation engineering. And when he was a student, I really enjoyed teaching Ajay various courses. And Ajay is a very studious during his stay at this institution. I tell you, he cracked GATE examination and joined IISc Bangalore for his master's program. He's a very promising student. We enjoyed teaching Nitin. He joined IISc Bangalore for his PG program. I think he also secured some national level rank, because otherwise, I just forgot about that. But entering IISc Bangalore itself is a great matter to this institution, because this institution started BTech program in electronics and instrumentation engineering in 1981. This institution is first institution to start a bachelor program in electronics and instrumentation engineering program. And Ajay is a proud alumnus of such a great department. And Ajay Nitin is presently working as product manager with Philips Healthcare. He has around 20 years of experience in research and development related to magnetic resonance imaging, that we call MRI. He is specialized in product definition and development, user experience design, clinical image processing, clinical workflow enhancements. So having this wonderful experience, we requested Ajay to help this faculty development program. I'm sure with his research experience and other experience at product development and management with Philips Healthcare, our participants will be the best beneficiaries of his presence today. So thank you very much, Ajay, for joining us. I now request Ajay to go ahead with his presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for those kind words. I can never forget, sir. I still remember those days when we were students. Yeah. Thank you, sir. And we always had a good connect. I always had good connect with Professor Ashok Reddy throughout these years. and I'm very proud to have learned from him, and I'm very proud to present in his course today.
Great.
At Philips, I've been specializing on, I call it as clinical image processing, basically using regular image processing techniques for clinical application. So today I'm going to talk a bit about how medical imaging works and what is so special or different about medical images compared to the routine normal images, and how do we take advantage of these images, and how do we take advantage of various image processing techniques in deriving meaningful value that helps doctors in diagnosing various diseases, in helping treating the patients, right? Because we have a very short time, this is a big topic, as you guys know. Image processing or signal processing is a large space. I will not be able to go into details of these specific processing techniques. However, I will try to give you an overview of the entire imaging space, medical imaging space, and show you the applications of where these image processing algorithms are used. So to start with, basically I'll be focusing on the overall medical image process, the imaging chain. How do you acquire images? What are the various steps involved in acquiring images? And where do we apply different signal processing and image processing algorithms? And next, I'll be taking you through the basic modalities. We call it as imaging systems. As you know, there are various modalities today available in the market. You have X-ray systems, ultrasound systems, MRI, and others. I will talk about the physics behind that, because that helps us in understanding what kind of image that comes out of that machine. And when we understand how it comes, we can understand the characteristics of the images. And based on the characteristics, we will know what kind of image processing algorithms are suitable for those images. I will also show you a few applications of these modalities. And finally, I will focus on the clinical applications. Most of the clinical applications are aimed at deriving some quantitative information, right? Some numbers, something that you can really work with, something that you can quantify and stage or then decide on treatment of the progression of the disease. I will show you some applications and examples of that. The overall medical image process, in a nutshell, can be seen as the diagram that is shown here. So the first and foremost important thing is the data acquisition system. That's the actual machine. We call it as scanners. So you must have seen in hospitals, you have CT scanners, MR scanners, ultrasound scanners. All the hardware is data acquisition system. And these are special devices, unlike normal cameras. You can get pictures from cameras also, right? And we know regular cameras work on the visible light spectrum, right? You look at visible light and then you take a picture out of it. But whereas these are specialized equipment that have, I would say, special capability to look into things. These can look into things that are normally not visible through regular cameras. And they employ various properties of physics in acquiring the signals and then generating images. We'll go a little bit deep into each of these systems a little later. But the moment you acquire a signal, right, in a normal visual camera, it's a light that falls on a CCD, for example, then you convert and then make a picture, right? Whereas in this case, it's slightly different. Each of the modalities have different physics. So they generate different signals. And like any other system, so you need to process the signal before you can make sense out of it. So we deploy a lot of pre-processing techniques to make the signal qualifiable to make an image. And then you have a control computer. Basically, we call it as consoles. That's where you have monitor, and that's where you have all the controls to control the scanner and the way you want to acquire images, the way you want to process, right? And in many cases, most of these imaging systems will also have an high processing computing system next to the control computer. And this is predominantly required to reconstruct images. We'll go a little deep into that very soon. After you generate images, these images are put into repository, a database where you store images for a longer duration. And most of these systems nowadays also come up with advanced clinical processing applications. We call that as post-processing that you see on the right top. This is where you try to derive some additional information from the image. So when you see an image, we can make sense out of it, we can derive some aspects, but there will be a lot of hidden information in the image that are not visible to human eye. And we will use plenty of post-processing techniques in deriving that meaning, that value out of those images, and help radiologists in diagnosing the particular case. If you go a little deep into what happens in each of these steps, for example, in the pre-processing step, where you acquire the raw signal, basically we convert the signal. Conversion here includes converting the signal into human understandable units. For example, in X-ray, what you measure is the absorption rate. That's not easy to understand. And we convert into some numbers that we can relate. When you see the number, you can relate it to a particular tissue. For example, a bone has this value, whereas a fat has this value, right? And most of these systems are digital systems, so you need ADC, digitization. And a lot of these systems also, like any other systems in the world, have noise inherent in the signal. There will be denoising algorithms deployed in pre-processing, and obviously anti-aliasing. And a lot of such signal processing techniques are used in pre-processing step. And once we do all this, that's when you have a meaningful signal to start generating images. After, So then we look at the reconstruction part, the high performance computing side. So this is where you collect all the signals. In most of these modalities, the image doesn't come in one shot. You acquire multiple signals sequentially, and then collate all the signals, and then start reconstructing. So there are two types of reconstruction normally. One is analytical, which is a basic mathematical model, a classical one, which has been there in the field for almost 30-40 years for most of these systems. And recently, there are a lot of developments in iterative algorithms. Iterative is where you don't acquire the complete data, but you start reconstructing the moment you have minimum set, even if you have incomplete. So we start reconstruction with an incomplete set and try to see if the signals are good enough to make an image that is readable. Right? I'll talk a little bit about that a little later. And most of these image reconstruction algorithms work on Fourier domain, the frequency domain, because that's where a lot of image processing algorithms have a lot of advantages in terms of performance, in terms of ability to do a lot of corrections in the signal. And we'll also do a lot of subsampling because the whole aim of the scanner is to get the job done as fast as possible, because your patients who are suffering or not, who won't be able to cooperate for these images. So time is of essence. So over the last, I would say 10 years, a lot of focus, a lot of research investments are going to speed up the acquisitions and reduce the dosage that we expose the patient. In CT and X-ray, as you know, we use X-rays, ionizing radiation that is being exposed to the patient. And there's a lot of stress on reducing that exposure. And the only way we can do is employ a lot of software reconstruction algorithms wherein we can generate an image which is equivalent with less and less data. So we are moving away from acquiring the entire sample space, acquire as less as possible, and compute as much as possible to derive the image. And not only that, reconstruction also corrects for a lot of artifacts. It could be very classical artifacts that we see in image processing, or very specific artifacts that are associated with the device, like distortion. Most of these modalities are trying to cover a bigger region, and they are bound to have some distortions in the image. And we do a lot of corrections for those in the reconstruction. And when you look at post-processing, this is where the clinical image processing comes. Classic image processing techniques like segmentation, registration, fusion of multiple images are used in this step. And these are all aimed to quantify, derive meaningful information. And there's a lot of fancy visualization also comes into play, where you present this information in an easy to understand fashion to the user. So this is an overview of how the medical image processing works. Then we'll go into the systems, imaging systems, basically various modalities that we have today. We'll try to understand the physics behind each of these and the images that they generate and the applications. I will not be dwelling into each and every modality. I will only talk about the most famous, most well-known equipments like X-ray systems, CT scanners, MRI, ultrasound, and PET. There are a few more which are not as widely used as these five. Most of these equipments are used for diagnosis, right? Diagnosis is just interpretation. We are not doing anything with this device to the patient. We are just taking a picture, looking into the body, and trying to make sense of what's happening. And some of these are also used in intervention. So you do surgery, you do intervene into the patient. While doing that, we use some of this equipment, basically to have real-time peep into the body, real-time imaging while you are performing an procedure. Simple example could be angioplasty, when you do heart surgeries, when you're inserting stent, cardiac stent. That's a classic example that most of us are aware. So when you're inserting the stent, you really need to see if you're inserting it in the right position, or you're going through the right blood vessel. So you use some of these equipments to have a real-time imaging when you're doing some complex procedures like angioplasty. And some of these are also used in treatment. So these machines can also treat certain conditions. Right? I'll come into that in nuclear medicine equipment. You might ask, why do we have so many equipments? Why do we need? Why do we have 5 or more than 5 today? We have about 8, 9 modalities. So the basic reason is each of these modalities exploit different characteristics. And each of these modalities provides different information. So based on the clinical condition, based on the outcome that you want to get, you choose the right equipment. So when I go into each modality, I will tell their advantages and disadvantages, right? When I said they exploit different characteristics, simple example, like for example, CT and X-ray are very good at imaging bones and air. But anything in between, which is soft, we call it as soft tissues like muscles, fat, or spleen. All of these are not very well distinguished by any of the X-ray modalities, right? And MRI is superior in that. So you use different modalities based on what you want to image. And obviously, cost comes into picture in the medical industry. It also depends on the cost of the equipment, cost of the examination, and you try to balance the benefit with the cost, and then you choose the right imaging modality. This whole thing started with the invention of X-rays. Most of us know this. They were invented in 1895 by accident, in fact. And then very soon, within a year, people realized the potential of X-rays in seeing through the human body, looking at bones, trying to identify the foreign bodies. And then it developed into a very complex procedure like angiography that we use widely today. And it also started as a profession in medicine. Radiology is a profession. It's after you do your basic medicine, you do specialize in radiology. And a lot of advancements, which we'll also see towards the end when I show a lot of examples on what we have achieved in the last 60 years. So the first and foremost modality is X-ray system. Most of us are aware of it. Its very basic principle is the absorption of X-rays. As you know, X-rays can pass through the human body. So this is the simplest diagram. You have X-ray generator throwing X-rays through the object. Your object could be a human body. And you have a detector on the other end. basically trying to measure the energy that comes out at the end after passing through the object. What we try to detect here is what is left out of X-ray after certain energy is being absorbed by the human body. So we call it as attenuation. The X-ray gets attenuated, and the advantage we take is different tissues in the human body attenuate X-rays differently. So based on what comes out of the detector, we try to interpret the image and try to interpret the tissues that we see on the images. It's a very straightforward system, and there are a lot of complex applications of this. So a basic system is a mobile X-ray system you must have seen in some of the hospitals. This is the equipment that you take to the bedside. This is the equipment that is used in most of the trauma cases. Trauma is the emergency department, where you have to take a quick view of what happened, especially in accident cases. When you see a road accident, take the patient into the hospital. The first thing that they do is do an X-ray to see if there are fractures on the patient. A different system that you might also have seen in the hospital is ceiling mounted. These are used for different applications. And the most complex one out of X-ray modalities is the interventional. Interventional can take an image in any angle, in any position, anywhere. And this is the equipment that is used classically when you do angiography, when you do stent surgeries, any cardiac procedure, any neuro procedure, any surgical procedures mostly uses interventional X-ray systems. And the basic systems that you see on the left-hand side are not very expensive. They come in within a few lakhs of rupees, whereas interventional X-rays go up to 50 lakhs or more than that. And they have very advanced motorized controls and advanced computers in doing real-time imaging and real-time image processing and guiding these complex procedures. Some common examples, as I said, X-ray is very well used for bones to see fractures. You might have seen this in your earlier days. And this is the highest used medical procedure, the plain chest X-ray, right? And when you go to health checkup, you would have seen this. And one of the complex example is the digital subtraction angiography. What you are seeing in this picture is the blood vessels in the brain, right? And we have see how beautiful it looks. You can see only the blood vessels. The overall structure of how blood is supplied to various tissues of brain. And the way it is done is you take an X-ray before you inject a contrast agent. And the reason we inject contrast agent is we have specialized chemical agents which absorb X-ray slightly differently from human tissues. And when this contrast agent is injected into the human body, it flows to various parts of the body through the blood. And when you do an X-ray, this contrast agent shows the blood, the track where the blood is going. And you do an image before you take contrast, and you do an image after you take contrast, and you subtract these two images. What you see is only the difference. And the difference is purely because of contrast, right? And that's why you can generate these kind of images. And we use a lot of image processing techniques in subtraction is not straightforward, as I'm putting it here simply. There are a lot of complexities in subtracting. There could be a lot of motion because you're taking images at two different points, right? And the resolution of these images are in sub-millimeter, under 1 millimeter, right? And a motion of under 1 millimeter is difficult to control in a patient who already is suffering and nervous. And you do a lot of image processing techniques to compensate for that motion and do a lot of enhancements in the signal. And only then you can achieve images like this. So basically the images are generated, this is a summary, by absorption of X-rays. And because of this technique, the characteristics are X-rays have very high resolution because the resolution is only limited by the wavelength of X-ray, which we know is very, very small, right? And you can achieve less than 0.1 millimeter resolution in the X-rays. But the disadvantage of X-rays is the low contrast ratio. It is because it superimposes different layers. So you are getting an image of the entire thickness of the body. When you're taking the chest X-ray, for example, you have lungs in the path, you have ribs in the path, you have skin, various elements are coming into picture, but what you get at the end is the accumulated attenuation. So that reduces the contrast. You cannot clearly see just the lungs, right? So that's the disadvantage of X-rays. But it has good acquisition speed. So you can finish an examination within few milliseconds. In the recent systems, we can go up to nanoseconds. So you push a button, and in less than 1 millisecond, you get the image out, right? Including all the processing that we do in image processing and acquisition, detection, everything. So that's why these equipments are used in emergency departments for trauma cases. So the next modality I'll be talking about is CT. CT also uses X-rays. It also uses a similar principle of absorption of X-rays, but the way it works is very different. CT produces cross-sectional images. In the next slide, I will tell you what is cross-section. Cross-section is just one 2D plane, whereas in X-ray, like I said, you have superimposed information. CT tries to solve that problem. It tries to look at one 2D plane in the body at a time. And apart from that, CT also uses Hounsfield units. These are normalized. Hounsfield is a scientist who actually came up with this procedure. These are standardized and normalized units where we give certain numbers for different tissues. So you see a simple table here. So we say attenuation of water as 0. We take that as a reference. And for different tissues in the body, based on the attenuation, we give different Hounsfield units. So on the image, we can measure the Hounsfield units. And when you measure, you can identify the tissue that you're looking at. So this is heavily used in CT images in segmenting different tissues. Segmentation is an algorithm where you try to separate different parts of the image, try to clearly draw boundaries, try to clearly identify various parts in the image. Right? In medicine, it's very, very important because a lot of our tissues are not well separated. Not sure if you've seen real images. If you eat non-veg, you see, right? A lot of the tissues, organs within a human body or any animal body, it's not easy to distinguish. They do not have clear boundaries, right? And segmentation is very important for us to get it right. When I say cross-sectional images, this is what it means. For example, if you're taking an image of the brain, what you're looking at is a very thin slice, very thin 2D plane in the head. So in this picture on the right-hand side is a thin slice, a 2D image that is showing information pertaining to only that plane in the human body. And different element in that is called voxel. In regular image processing, we use term called pixel. We call it voxel because the thickness is not infinitesimal. There is certain thickness, and the signal that you get is from a 3D volume. That's why it's a voxel. So each element or pixel in the image gets a signal from a certain volume in the slice. Right? This is how the images are generated in CT. Then you can question, how do you get that image? CT basically works, this is a classical reconstruction technique of CT, uses a back projection algorithm. Going back to the X-ray modality that we saw earlier in the X-ray slide. So you have the source, which is the X-ray, and you have the body object. And when you pass the X-ray to the body and you have a detector on the other end, and based on what the X-ray passes through, you get a projection of the absorption. And this is just one dimensional, right? If you assume that this object is 2D plane, like a paper, like a cross-sectional image, and if your X-rays are like a line, then what you get is just a 1D projection of this image. And we cannot construct 2D images with just one 1D projection. So what we do is you imagine that you got the signal on the detector, and the way we generate image is try to project that signal back onto the object. If you just have one profile like this, you project and get an image like this, because you don't know where the object is. The object could be anywhere in the path, right? And you'll still get the same attenuation independent of the position of the object. So to resolve this complexity, we take projections from multiple angles. And if you imagine doing the same thing for each of the projection, you can see that you can approximate the object. So with 3 projections, for example, on 2 perpendicular and 145-degree angulation, you see that the object is getting higher density when you project it back. And when you do many of them, you see a very good approximation of where the object was. So we do it for all 360 degrees, and the actual original object was like this, but using a simple back projection, you got an approximation of the object. So we employ a little more complex image processing, signal processing. It's called filtered back projection, where you try to filter out a lot of unwanted information in the signals. And most of this is done in the frequency domain. Like I explained earlier, you have a lot of advantages. And when you do that, you try to remove those unwanted information, and you try to reproduce an image which is very accurate and resembles the original object. So this is how CT works in a nutshell. It's very complex than this, but in a nutshell, that's how you can understand CT. CT, like I said, uses X-ray projections in 1D, but we do multiple of them. Multiple 1D projections at different orientations, and you use back projection, basically filtered back projection, to reconstruct images. On the right-hand side, you can see images of the CT, and at the bottom, you can see how well we can distinguish some of the tissues based on the attenuation of X-rays on the CT. And you can also realize that, unlike X-ray images, what you're seeing here is just one plane in the body, right? It's not the entire volume. It's not the first one is a brain image. It's a cross section of your skull. So it's not the entire head that you're seeing. You're only seeing one plane. And the bottom one is the abdomen, somewhere near your liver, stomach, right? You see liver in the image. You see spine. You see spleen. You see a lot of anatomy is coming in the picture. Because it uses X-rays, CT also has very good resolution, but CT gains in contrast ratio compared to X-rays. You can see it very clearly in the images in the slide. It gives slice view. For a normal human being like us, we might find the 3D view very easy to understand and read. But believe me when I say, for radiologists who are trained, they like 2D images. They like to look at images in 2D space like this, because they can make a lot of sense out of these images, and 3D images do not provide enough information for them to diagnose. So slice view is much better than a volume or 3D like we like, right? I mean, for radiologists, this is what they want. There's less blur. We do a lot of signal processing in reducing and blur and artifacts. But CT uses, because we have to take projections in multiple angles. So there is a gantry in the system which rotates at a high speed. So a typical CT examination takes anywhere between 2 to 5 seconds. And within 2 to 5 seconds, we acquire around 180 projections into roughly 256 slices. Right? And now you can imagine how many rotations that the gantry has to do within those 2 seconds. There's a high-speed rotation that can result in some artifacts due to electrical artifacts that are employed in the motors. It could be due to motion artifacts. A lot of artifacts are introduced. Those are also removed through image processing techniques. In some cases, CT also has some distortions. Those are also removed through image processing techniques. CT has wide applications. CT is used in neuro, for brain, thorax, cardiac, you name it, abdomen, spine, lungs, tumors. Predominantly, CT is used for bones and air, like I said, but CT also uses contrast agent, like X-ray does, and that helps CT to image blood vessels and tissues that absorb blood. So there are a lot of studies related to blood that can be done using CT. That's why CT is widely used even in cardiac. Cardiac angiograms are also quite common, we must have heard. So you do CT to get an angiogram. Angiogram is nothing but an image of blood vessels. And when I say cardiac angiogram, it's the blood vessels of the heart. So you look at blood vessels of the heart to identify if there is any blockage in the vessels when you suspect a heart attack or any cardiac related problems. I'll show some examples towards the end. And using visualization and image processing techniques, CT inherently only produces 2D images like you see on the top, but we use a lot of techniques to reconstruct 3D projections, 3D views, like the below ones from those 2D images. So at the bottom, you see the heart. You can also see the details that are captured and reconstructed from the plain 2D images, right? And towards the left, you see an image where you can see the entire structure of the lungs. I have some more examples towards the end where I'll tell you the applications of that. And the next, I'm passionate about MRI. I've been with MRI for 20 years. And it's one of the most complex systems in the entire imaging space. And MRI is very good at imaging soft tissues. Anything that is not bone comes out very good in MR images. Basically, MR uses signal from water. And in fact, not even water, it uses signal from hydrogen. And human body, or not only human body, you take any organic tissue, plants, fruits, animals, all of us are built with hydrogens. Right? We have 80% of our entire mass coming from hydrogen. And what's the source of the signal from MRI? As you know, hydrogen is a proton. It just has one proton and one electron. Going back to our earlier days where we studied chemistry. So when you have a net charge with one electron, it has a magnetic spin, right? And a spin with a charge is nothing but magnetic field. It's a standard electromagnetic principle. So each hydrogen atom has a net magnetic field in itself. It's very small if you take an hydrogen atom individually, but it is good enough for us to give signal. Because when you take a cell, it has millions of hydrogens in it. And that's good enough for us to detect. It's very complex to explain how the images are generated. I'll try to put it very simply. What we do is we put the patient into a high magnetic field. We know the Earth's magnetic field is around 5 Gauss, and 1 Tesla is close to 10,000 Gauss. And most of these MRI systems have close to 1.5 or 3 Tesla magnetic field in the system. So that is roughly 6,000 times the magnetic field of the Earth. And we also know the power of the magnetic field of the Earth. If you have a magnetic needle, so we know the force of it, right? It can even rotate a mechanical device, move a mechanical device. And when you have 60,000 more power in the magnetic field, and when you put a human body into that magnetic field is completely harmless. Nothing happens to any organic structure due to magnetic field. We are exposed to it continuously, right? So when you put a human body into magnetic field, what happens is all these tiny hydrogen magnetic moments are aligned with the magnetic field. So you're basically forcing them to come to one direction. And after that, we excite with an RF pulse, radio frequency pulse. Again, this is completely harmless. Today we are surrounded with RF radiation. You use your telephone, you use your TV, you use your radio. we have RF radiation everywhere, right? So totally harmless. So what happens with this RF excitation? It's a very tuned RF excitation. It tries to disturb the alignment of hydrogen atoms. If you remember quantum physics, when you supply an energy, the electron jumps into its higher state. So in this case, the higher state is a magnetic moment that is not aligned with the magnetic field. As simple as that. You use RF excitation to disturb the magnetic moment. And when you stop giving RF pulse, hydrogen atom tries to come back to its stable state, emitting that RF signal. And we use coils, RF coils, like what is used in a typical radio, for example, to pick up this magnetic signal. And these magnetic signals are very, very, very minute. We have very sensitive, very state-of-the-art coils to detect this magnetic signal. And from this signal is what we generate images. So the areas of tissues that have a lot of hydrogen content, for example, generates higher signal. And different tissues come back to their stable state at a different rate. I mean, some take 2 nanoseconds to come back, some take 20 nanoseconds to come back. So based on the timing of where you acquire the signal, we can determine which signal to pick. Okay. To simply put, you have hydrogen in the human body, which has magnetic moment. When you put the patient in the high magnetic field, all the hydrogen atoms are aligned. We disturb them through RF signal and then pick up the RF signal that comes out of the body again and make an image out of it. Because the signal comes from hydrogen, you can visualize soft tissue details. MR has good resolution, but not as good as CT and X-ray. MR has tremendous contrast ratio advantage because in X-ray, you cannot change the property of the absorption. Other than contrast injection, there is no way we can change the way bone absorbs or fat absorbs X-rays, right? So you'll always get the same signal. Whereas in MR, that's not the case. Like I said, based on the timing of the coil detection, we can determine which tissue to pick up the signal from. So that gives a lot of advantages for us to get different contrasts of the same tissue. A good analogy is the satellite imaging using different frequencies. So you can see the same thing through different, when you apply different frequencies, you can see a lot of other details that respond to different frequencies. MR also has a slice view, and similar to CT, it has blur, other artifacts, distortion. But the most disadvantaged thing with MR is the acquisition speed. A typical MR exam can take anywhere between 10 to 30 minutes. And that is the sad part. You have a patient who is nervous, who is worried about what happened to him, and you ask the patient to stay still while you're acquiring because you will have motion artifacts if the patient moves, and he has to stay still for more than 10 minutes. Right? So that's the challenge. That's why, like I said, there's in the last 5 to 10 years, a lot of research is in speeding up the acquisition. So we use a lot of signal processing and image processing techniques in acquiring less and less signals and reconstructing more and more information. Right? In the recent past, if you remember signal processing, the basic course of signal processing, you would have studied about Nyquist criteria. So you at least need 2 samples from 1 cycle, 2 times the frequency of the signal, right, to generate or synthesize a signal. But there are models that are used today which can defeat the theorem. So now today we acquire much less than 2 sample points and yet reconstruct the signal accurately. So the advanced mathematical models like compressed sensing, which are enabling us to beat the speed problem. Now we can make MR images in less than 1 minute. Some of them are even in a few seconds. Right? So that's the power of signal processing in medical imaging. like CT, typically MR is used for anatomical studies. When I say anatomy, it's basically looking at the structure of the body. In these images, you can only see the tissue structures, right? You can see the boundaries, you can see the shape, size, position, but you do not know if the tissue is functioning correctly or not, right? So those are called functional studies, wherein you not only look at the size, shape, and density and other physical properties, you will also try to see the function of it. MR can also play a role in determining the functionality of the tissue. In the applications, I'll show some more examples. Any questions before I move ahead?
Yeah, sir, I have a query related to CT scan.
Yeah.
Actually, you told that always the